The Grand Colosseum of Vexoria hummed with anticipation. 70,000 spectators from across 17 star systems packed the tiered seating, their appendages and tentacles and chitinous limbs all quivering with excitement. The betting pools had reached astronomical numbers. The arena floor, freshly coated with blue-green absorption sand, awaited the day's entertainment. I, Zarkus Fendril, Chief Game Master of the Vexorian Empire, surveyed the crowd from my private observation booth. My 3 hearts pounded with nervous energy. Today was exceptional. Today was unprecedented. Today could either elevate my status to legendary or cost me my position, possibly my life. Game Master Fendril. The human prisoner is ready, announced Trellix, my spindle-limbed assistant. Her voice modulator twittered with what I recognized as amusement. Do you truly believe this will be entertaining? The human is so fragile-looking. I flicked my sensory ridges in irritation. The Supreme Chancellor herself requested this match, Trellix. The human diplomat refused to bow during the ceremonial greeting. Such disrespect cannot go unpunished. But throwing him into the arena with all 7 battle beasts simultaneously, Trellix's eye stalks curled inward, a gesture of concern. No combatant has ever faced more than 3 at once. The human requested it, I replied with a dismissive wave of my primary hand. Said it would. And I quote, save everyone time. Arrogant creature. The announcement chimes rang through the Colosseum, and the crowd roared in response. The Supreme Chancellor of Vexoria, Domina Vrax, entered her royal box opposite mine. Her ceremonial armor glinted with precious metals, her facial tentacles adorned with victory tokens from 100 conquered worlds. Citizens of the glorious Vexorian Empire, boomed the announcer system. Today we witness justice upon the human diplomatic envoy who dared show disrespect to our beloved Supreme Chancellor. The crowd chittered and howled their approval. Domina Vrax raised her scepter, silencing them instantly. The human will face all 7 of our most prized combat beasts, she declared, her voice amplified across the arena. Let this serve as a lesson to all who would disrespect Vexorian customs. More cheers. More frenzy. I swallowed nervously. Something about this felt wrong. The human had seemed almost pleased when sentenced to the arena. What did these strange bipeds know that we did not? Release the human, commanded the Chancellor. A small door opened at the far end of the arena. The human walked out casually, wearing nothing but the simple white tunic provided to all condemned prisoners. No armor, no weapons. Just a medium-height biped with tan skin and dark hair cropped short. He walked to the center of the arena with a relaxed gait, looking around as if attending a garden party rather than his own execution. Released the Thoraxian spine crusher. The first gate opened with a thunderous clang. From the shadows emerged a 12-meter-long arthropod with massive pincers that could snap a battle tank in half. Its armored segments clacked as it scuttled toward the human, compound eyes glittering with predatory intent. Is that human smiling? Trellix whispered, her voice modulator pitched high with disbelief. Indeed, the small bipe stood calmly, hands loose at his sides, an expression that seemed almost amused on his flat face. The spine crusher charged, its pincers wide open. What happened next defied comprehension. The human sidestepped with impossible speed. As the beast thundered past, the human reached out with his bare hand and touched something on the creature's underside. The spine crusher immediately froze, then curled its massive body into a defensive ball, mandibles tucked tight against its thorax. What in the 7 moons? I gasped. To release the Magma Wolf, screamed the Chancellor, her facial tentacles flushing dark purple with rage. The second gate opened. The crowd fell silent as the most feared predator of the volcanic plains of HFY stalked into the arena. 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with skin like cooling lava and jaws that could crush neutronium ore, the Magma Wolf had killed 28 gladiators before any managed to defeat it. The wolf sniffed the air, its molten eyes fixing on the human. It growled, magma drool sizzling where it hit the sand, and bounded forward in a blur of motion. The human stood his ground. Just before impact, he made a strange clicking sound with his mouth. The Magma Wolf skidded to a halt, ears perked forward. The human extended a hand. The beast approached slowly, then to the stunned silence of 70,000 spectators lowered its massive head and allowed the human to scratch behind its ear. "This is impossible," whispered Trellix. "That beast killed my third cousin's entire battle squadron. To release all remaining beasts," shrieked the Chancellor, her composure completely shattered. Immediately, 5 gates crashed open simultaneously. Into the arena poured the Void Serpent, 20 meters of translucent, reality-bending flesh from the space between stars. The Graviton Bull, its hooves creating localized gravity wells with each step, its horns capable of tearing holes in the fabric of space-time. The Quantum Mantis phasing in and out of existence, its bladed forearms sharp enough to cut through atomic bombs. The Nightmare Spider, with venom that caused victims to experience their worst fears until their hearts simply stopped from terror. And finally, the Death Whisperer, a floating, ethereal entity that fed on life force itself, nearly invisible except for the shimmer of dying air around it. The crowd had gone from excited to confused to terrified. Many began pushing toward the exits. This was unprecedented. These creatures were never released together. The risk to the audience was incalculable. The human remained utterly calm in the center of the arena, now surrounded by the galaxy's most lethal creatures. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them again, and smiled. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said, his voice somehow carrying throughout the Colosseum without amplification. "My name is Jackson Lee, diplomatic envoy of Earth. I believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding my refusal to bow." The Death Whisperer floated toward Jackson Lee, tendrils of life-stealing energy reaching for him. The human turned slightly, making a gentle gesture with one hand. The creature immediately withdrew, coiling its essence into a non-threatening posture. "You see," continued the human, as the Quantum Mantis folded its killing blades and settled onto the sand beside him, "that Earth representatives don't bow because we've learned something important about predators over our evolutionary history." The Void Serpent slithered forward, its massive head hovering above the human. Jackson Lee reached up and patted its undulating scales. The serpent's body vibrated in what appeared to be pleasure. "Supreme Chancellor," I called desperately into my communicator. "We must stop this. Something is very wrong." "Predators," continued Jackson Lee, now scratching the Nightmare Spider's thorax as the creature's 8 legs wiggled contentedly, "respect confidence. They respect strength. Most importantly, they respect those who understand them." The Graviton Bull pawed the ground next to the human, no longer creating devastating gravity wells, but instead acting like a docile farm animal. Lee placed his hand on its massive shoulder. "Humanity evolved on a planet filled with predators. We weren't the strongest or the fastest, or the ones with the sharpest claws. But we were the ones who learned to study other creatures, to understand them, to communicate with them, and eventually, to domesticate them." Chancellor Vrax stood speechless in her box, facial tentacles hanging limp with shock. The Colosseum had gone deathly quiet. "Every beast you've sent against me today shares traits with creatures from Earth. Your spine crusher? Very similar to our horseshoe crabs. Gentle creatures, really, if you know where their calming glands are located." He pointed to the still-curled arthropod. "Your Magma Wolf? Remarkably similar brain structure to our canids, dogs, wolves, foxes. Domesticated them thousands of years ago." Jackson Lee walked in a slow circle, the 7 deadliest creatures in the known galaxy now arranged around him like protective guardians. The others were simple pattern recognition. The Void Serpent responds to the same handling techniques we use for large constrictors. The Graviton Bull's threat displays match our terrestrial bovines perfectly. Your Quantum Mantis? Just an oversized version of the praying mantis from our gardens. They all respond to specific light frequencies. He gestured to the creature, which was now swaying gently beside him. The Nightmare Spider's neurochemistry is remarkably similar to our tarantulas. They respond to certain vibrations. And this lovely creature. He pointed to the Death Whisperer, communicated telepathically. Once I opened my mind properly, we understood each other quite well. My third heart nearly stopped beating. This was beyond disaster. This was catastrophe. The Chancellor would have my head for this humiliation. Jackson Lee looked directly up at the Chancellor's box. I didn't bow, Domina Vrax, because on Earth we learned long ago that showing submission to predators is the surest way to be identified as prey. Instead, we stand tall, we make eye contact, and we establish mutual respect. The human snapped his fingers, and all 7 beasts rose to attention around him. Now then, I believe we were in the middle of trade negotiations. I'm ready to continue whenever you are. Or, his voice took on a harder edge, we can consider this a declaration of hostile intent against Earth, in which case I'll be leaving with my new friends here and reporting back to our fleet currently holding position just outside your sensor range. Panic erupted in the Chancellor's box. Advisors rushed to her side, whispering urgently. Domina Vrax's color shifted from rage purple to the pale blue of fear. Perhaps. Jackson Lee suggested mildly, as he stroked the Void Serpent's massive head, we should restart our diplomatic engagement. This time with the understanding that humans don't bow not out of disrespect, but because we come from a planet where we learn to stand eye to eye with predators and teach them to serve us instead. The Graviton bull nuzzled against Jackson's shoulder affectionately. The Death Whisperer circled protectively above his head. I sank into my chair, transfixed by the scene below. In just moments, this unassuming biped had turned the most feared creatures in the galaxy into loyal companions. What else could these humans do? What kind of deathworld had spawned such beings? Game Master Fendrel, came the Chancellor's shaking voice over my communicator. Escort the human diplomat back to the negotiation chamber, with full honors. Yes, Chancellor, I replied weakly. And Fendrel? She added. Yes, Chancellor. Let's never speak of this again. Jackson Lee looked up at my box and winked a strange human gesture I would later learn indicated shared secrecy or amusement. Then he whispered something to the creatures around him and walked calmly toward the exit gate, 7 monsters of legend following obediently behind like well-trained pets. As Chief Game Master of the greatest combat arena in 17 star systems, I had witnessed countless battles, duels, and exhibitions of martial prowess. But nothing had prepared me for the sight of a single unarmed human commanding the galaxy's apex predators with nothing but knowledge, confidence, and understanding. The human hadn't just survived the arena. He had conquered it without spilling a drop of blood. And somehow that was infinitely more terrifying than any violence could have been. News traveled faster than light across the Vexorian Empire. Within hours, every communication channel buzzed with rumors of what had transpired in the Grand Colosseum. Most dismissed them as preposterous exaggerations. 7 battle beasts, all subdued without weapons, were absurd, but I, Zarkus Fendrel, knew the truth. I had witnessed it with my own 4 eyes. 2 rotation cycles had passed since the incident. The human diplomatic envoy Jackson Lee had been installed in our most luxurious diplomatic quarters. Trade negotiations had resumed with remarkable speed, and the terms had shifted dramatically in Earth's favor. Funny how watching a single unarmed biped command 7 apex predators could change the Chancellor's perspective on interstellar relations. Game Master Fendrel, chimed my communicator. The Supreme Chancellor requests your presence. My stomach's clenched with dread. Despite her public composure, Chancellor Vrax had been furious about the arena debacle. A career, possibly my life, hung in the balance. The Chancellor's reception chamber gleamed with the polished bones of her ancestors, a traditional display of Vexorian heritage. She sat upon her elevated throne, facial tentacles arranged in the formal pattern of official business. Game Master, she greeted me, her voice cold. We have a situation. I bowed deeply. How may I serve, Exalted One? The human wishes to visit the beasts. Her tentacles writhed slightly, betraying her discomfort. He claims to be concerned for their welfare. I blinked in confusion. The battle beasts, they have been returned to their containment facilities. Yes, and he wishes to see them. Claims they might be experiencing separation anxiety. She pronounced the foreign concept as if it tasted bitter. What even is that? I believe it is a psychological condition where bonded creatures experience distress when separated, I offered, recalling information from the xenobiology database. Psychological conditions. In Battle Beasts, the Chancellor's voice dripped with sarcasm. Next you will tell me the Void Serpent needs bedtime stories. A diplomatic aide rushed in, eyes wide with panic. Supreme Chancellor. The human has left his quarters. He's heading toward the beast containment sector. The Chancellor bolted upright. How? In the security protocols. He just walked past the guards. They report that they saw him, but somehow just let him pass, as if it seemed like the most natural thing. Summon the elite guard. Lock down all sectors. The Chancellor rounded on me. Fendrel, come with me. You've seen what this creature can do. We rushed through the palace corridors, guards scrambling in all directions. The beast containment facility was located beneath the Colosseum, a vast underground complex housing the Empire's collection of combat creatures from across the galaxy. As we approached the main security door, we found it wide open. 2 elite guards stood at attention, looking bewildered. "Why is this door open?" demanded the Chancellor. The human diplomatic envoy requested entry. Supreme Chancellor, responded one guard, confusion evident in his voice. He was most polite. "And you just opened our most secure facility for him," she screeched. "It seemed reasonable at the time," the guard replied lamely. Strange sounds echoed from within the facility. Not the usual growls and roars of caged predators, but something altogether different. Something that sounded almost like music. We cautiously entered the dimly lit corridor. The containment cells lined both sides, reinforced with the strongest materials in the Empire. But the scene that greeted us defied all logic. Every cell door stood open. Every force field deactivated. And in the central hub area, surrounded by the 7 deadliest creatures in known space, stood Jackson Lee. He appeared to be dancing. And the beasts were watching, some swaying in apparent rhythm. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded the Chancellor, her voice quavering despite her attempt at authority. Jackson Lee turned, a broad smile on his face. "Chancellor Vrax. Game Master Fendrel, perfect timing. We're having a little party." "A party," I repeated numbly. These magnificent creatures were desperately bored. No environmental enrichment, no socialization, no play opportunities. He shook his head disapprovingly. "On Earth, we learned long ago that predators need mental stimulation as much as physical exercise." The Magma Wolf lay on its side, massive paws in the air, as Lee reached over to rub its belly. The creature's leg thumped against the floor in apparent pleasure. "You realize," said the Chancellor carefully, "that these are not pets. They are the deadliest combatants in our arena." "Oh, I understand completely." Lee nodded seriously. "That's why proper care is even more important. Bored predators are dangerous predators." The void serpent had coiled itself into an elaborate spiral pattern on the floor. The nightmare spider appeared to be constructing some sort of web sculpture in the corner. The death whisperer floated near the ceiling, creating beautiful patterns of shimmering light. "You opened their cages," I said, unable to keep the horror from my voice. "All of them." "They gave me their word they would behave," Lee replied casually. "We've developed quite a rapport." "Their word?" The Chancellor's facial tentacles twisted in disbelief. "These are not sentient beings. They cannot give their word." Lee cocked his head. "Are you sure about that? Have you ever tried to communicate with them beyond forcing them to fight?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room, broken only by the contented purring of the quantum mantis as it preened itself nearby. "Let me show you something," Lee said, gesturing for us to follow. Warily, we approached a side chamber, the feeding area, where live prey was usually prepared for the beasts. Inside, we found the graviton bull and the Thoraxian spine crusher engaged in what appeared to be a game. The bull would create a small gravity well, and the crusher would roll its armored body through it, emerging on the other side with surprising grace. "They've invented their own entertainment," Lee explained proudly. "Took them less than an hour once I suggested they might enjoy each other's company instead of trying to kill each other." "This is impossible," whispered the Chancellor. "These creatures have been mortal enemies for generations." "Only because you've trained them to be," countered Lee. "On Earth, we've seen natural enemies become companions when given the right environment and proper introductions. Lions and dogs, cats and birds, predators and prey living in harmony." He pointed to the Death Whisperer, which was now creating a mesmerizing light display for the nightmare spider. "These beings are far more complex than you've given them credit for. They have emotions, desires, And yes, intelligence. A strange emotion passed through me, something like shame. For cycles upon cycles, I had overseen the arena, never questioning the suffering we inflicted upon these creatures for entertainment. "I don't understand," said the Chancellor, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "Why would humans bother to understand predators this way? If you have the technology to destroy them, because that's not who we are," Lee replied simply. "Humanity learned long ago that domination through force alone is temporary. Understanding, communication, mutual respect, these create lasting bonds." He gazed around at the beasts, now peacefully coexisting in a space where they had previously been kept isolated and enraged. "Besides, every one of these magnificent creatures knows something we don't. They perceive the world differently, experience reality through senses we can only imagine. There's so much to learn from them." The Magma Wolf approached the Chancellor cautiously. She flinched but held her ground. To my astonishment, the creature merely sniffed her tentacles, then gently bumped its head against her hand. "He wants you to pet him," Lee suggested with a smile. "Right behind the left ear is his favorite spot." With trembling fingers, the Supreme Chancellor of the mighty Vexorian Empire reached out and scratched the volcanic predator. Its eyes closed in bliss, a rumbling purr emanating from its molten throat. "Remarkable," she whispered. "Chancellor," Lee said, his tone shifting to something more formal. "I believe we need to discuss an amendment to our trade negotiations." Her tentacles stiffened. "What amendment? These beings deserve better. As part of our agreement, Earth would like to establish a wildlife sanctuary for them, a place where they can live freely or choose to work alongside sentient species as partners rather than gladiators." I expected outrage from the Chancellor. These beasts were Vexorian property, valuable assets. Instead, she continued to stroke the Magma Wolf, a thoughtful expression crossing her features. "You truly believe they are happier this way? Look at them." Lee gestured around. "Have you ever seen them this calm, this engaged, this peaceful?" Indeed, the scene before us was extraordinary. The quantum mantis and the void serpent appeared to be engaged in some sort of dance, phasing in and out of dimensions in perfect coordination. The nightmare spider had created an intricate web structure that captured light in beautiful patterns. Even the death whisperer, normally a creature of pure terror, floated contentedly nearby, its usual aura of dread completely absent. "There's something I should tell you about humans," Lee said softly. "Something you should understand for future relations." The Chancellor and I turned our attention to him. "Earth isn't just another world, it's what many species would call a deathworld. A planet so filled with dangers that sentient life should never have evolved there at all. Predators roam every habitat. Microorganisms wage constant war against our bodies. The weather itself can kill in 1,000 different ways." He reached out to touch the graviton bull, which had wandered over to join our conversation. But this environment didn't break us, it taught us. Every predator became a teacher, every danger, a lesson. "What lesson?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That strength comes in many forms. That understanding your opponent is more powerful than simply overpowering them. That communication and cooperation yield better results than constant conflict." Lee smiled. "And most importantly, that there's room enough in the universe for all kinds of beings to thrive together." The Chancellor was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving from creature to creature. "Very well," she said finally. "We will establish this sanctuary, and perhaps the Colosseum could evolve as well. Demonstrations of communication rather than combat." Lee beamed. "Earth would be honored to share our animal behavior specialists to help with the transition." As if understanding the conversation, the Magma Wolf gave a happy bark, startling a laugh from the Chancellor. Her facial tentacles flushed with a color I had rarely seen, the pink of genuine pleasure. "I suppose," she said wryly, "this means we'll need to revise our understanding of humans in our xenobiology database." "Oh?" Lee raised an eyebrow. "What does it currently say?" "Physically unimpressive omnivores from an unremarkable planet," I admitted. "Minimal natural defenses. Technological but not exceptionally advanced." Lee laughed. "Perhaps add masters of understanding other species, rich with respect and open communication." "And perhaps," added the Chancellor, with newfound respect in her voice, most dangerous when appearing most harmless. The human nodded, a glint in his eye. Be that too. Later that evening, as I updated the official records of the day's events, I struggled to find the right words. How does one describe the diplomatic incident that began with a human refusing to bow and ended with the complete restructuring of our most sacred cultural institution? In the end, I settled for the simple truth. Today, a human walked into our arena alone and every combat beast lowered its head. Not in submission to our might, but in recognition of something we had missed, that true power lies not in domination, but in understanding. As I completed my report, a message arrived from Earth's diplomatic vessel. Their scans had detected unusual activity in a nearby asteroid field, the possible emergence of a new predatory species. They invited Vexorian xenobiologists to join a joint research mission. The Supreme Chancellor had already approved our participation. I stared at the message, a new understanding dawning. Humans hadn't conquered their predators. They hadn't exterminated them. They had learned from them, grown alongside them, and ultimately formed partnerships with them. And now they were extending that same approach to the stars. Perhaps the galaxy was about to become a very different place. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly what it needed. Because if there's one thing more terrifying than a natural predator, it's a species that learned to walk among predators as equals and then reached for the stars with that same fearless curiosity.